There is a moment you already know. You don't have a word for it, but your body does. A song you've heard 100 times, or one you've never heard at all. It builds and it builds, and then one note, one voice cracking open in just the right place, and something moves across your skin. A wave up the arms, a prickle along the back of the neck. For about 10 seconds, you are covered in goosebumps. In a warm room, in no danger at all, because of a sound. Stop there, because that is one of the strangest things your body does, and almost no one ever asks why. Goosebumps from music. Your skin pulling itself into 100 tiny peaks, fluffing a coat of fur that you do not have because the melody resolved. The first person to take that shiver seriously and try to catch it in a laboratory was a neuroscientist named Jacques Panksepp. In 1995, he played people music and waited for the chills and marked when they came. And the first thing he found was not what you'd guess. It isn't the triumphant music that does it most, not the soaring, happy, victorious sound. It's the sad music, the lone voice rising out of a fuller sound, the poignant, aching kind. The chill he found lives closest to grief. And he had a haunting guess as to why. He thought the shiver of a sorrowful song might be borrowing a far older circuit, the one a young animal uses when it is separated from its mother, the cold prickle of being alone, that a piece of music which aches might reach all the way down and brush that ancient lonely nerve, that the goosebumps a song gives you might be the same goosebumps as a lost child calling out in the dark. I have to be honest with you this early, because we'll be honest all night. That last part is Panksepp's idea, a guess, not a settled fact. Nobody has proven what the music chill is for, but hold the image anyway, because it points straight at the real mystery. Because here is the thing, that shiver was not built for music. Music is far too young. The reflex it reaches for is old, older than every song ever sung, older than our bare skin, older than anything you would call a person. The same machine that lifts the hair on your arm at a piece of music is the machine that stands a terrified animal's fur on end. It is a survival reflex, and it is going off in the warm and the safe for nothing but beauty. So find it right now on your own forearm in the dark. One hair. You can't feel it lying there, and most of the day it does nothing, and you have never once thought about it on purpose. But that single hair has a tiny muscle at its root, smaller than a grain of salt, whose entire job, the only thing it was built to do, is to pull that hair upright, to stand it on end, to raise a goosebump where there is no longer any fur to raise. Hold that one hair in your mind. We're going to follow it all the way down, into your skin, back 2 or 3 million years, and back out to the song that put the shiver there in the first place. And we are going to come back to this exact hair at the end of the night. And by then, the most useless thing on your body is going to look like one of the kindest. You don't have to do anything. Just lie there and let me show you what's hiding in a goosebump. Start with the thing itself, because a goosebump is not a feeling. It's a movement, a real mechanical event with a muscle and a nerve and a name. At the root of every hair on your body sits that little muscle. Anatomists call it the arrector pili, the Latin and wonderfully literal, the razor of the hair, a thin band of smooth muscle, the involuntary kind, the kind you can't flex on purpose. One end anchors into the skin near the surface. The other end grips the side of the hair follicle, down in the deep warm layer where the hair is made. And when it contracts, it tugs the slanted follicle upright, the way a tent pole levers a sagging canvas straight. The hair stands, and the skin around it dimples into that small pale bump. What pulls the trigger is a nerve, not a thought. A nerve from the body's oldest alarm network, inspiring the sympathetic system, the one that runs fear and cold and fight or flight, the one you never consult. When it fires, it sprays a single chemical word onto that muscle. No epinephrine. The muscle has a slot for it. The word lands in the slot. The muscle clenches. The hair goes up. No decision. No permission. By the time you notice the bump, the nerve has already spoken, and the muscle has already answered. And it pulls hard. For something so small, in 2016, a group of dermatologists led by Andy Gorn measured it. They used a drug that mimics that chemical word, painted it on, and then measured how much force it took to pluck a single hair before and after. After the muscle clenched, plucking that hair took about 170% more force, nearly 3 times the grip it has at rest, the tiny fist closing hard around the root. People have been naming this for a very long time, and the names are all pictures. The medical term for goosebumps is cutis anserina, which is just Latin for goose skin, perhaps. The pricked, plucked look of a bird's bare flesh. The fancy word for the hair standing up is horripilation, from a root that means to bristle. Every culture that looked at this saw the same thing. A person, for a moment going faintly animal. Cricked skin, bristling hair, the body remembering something the mind forgot. Now, here's the first thing that complicates the pretty story, and I want to give it to you early, because it's the kind of honesty we keep all night. You probably think of goosebumps as an emotion. I think the thing that happens when you're moved or scared, but measure it carefully, and that turns out to be only a sliver of the truth. In 2024, a researcher named McFetris ran people through cold and touch and stirring music and film while filming their skin, and found that a cold draft or a light touch raises your hair just about as reliably as the most beautiful song. The reflex isn't for feeling. It answers cold and contact first. The emotion is the latecomer. And stranger still, what you feel and what your skin actually does don't even line up. Back in 2011, 2 scientists, Matthias Benedek and Christian Kambach, filmed people's skin, while those people reported their own chills. Often the person swore they had goosebumps when the camera showed smooth, still skin, and sometimes the skin prickled up, while the person felt nothing at all. The bump and the feeling are 2 different events, only loosely holding hands. So hold the mystery, not the certainty. You have a muscle on every hair, fired by an alarm nerve, gripping almost twice as tight when it goes, and most of the time, it's answering the cold, or a touch, or nothing you can name. The question the whole night is built on is simply, why? Why carry 100,000 tiny muscles to fluff a coat you don't have? To answer that, you have to leave your own warm bed and go a very long way back, because the goosebump is not a human invention. You inherited it, fully built, from animals that needed it, far more than you do. It had 2 old jobs. The first is warmth. Picture any furred mammal in the cold, a cat on a winter's step, a fox in the snow, a mouse in a frozen field. When the chill hits, the same nerve fires the same muscles, and every hair on the animal stands up at once. And that does something useful. It puffs the fur out and traps a thick layer of still air against the warm skin. Still air is a marvelous blanket. The fluffed coat holds a cushion of the animal's own heat close to the body, and the cold stays outside it. In 2014, a team including the skin evolution scientist Nina Jablonski worked through the physics of this for primates and confirmed the obvious sad joke of it for us. The trick only works if you have fur. On a nearly bare human arm, the muscles fire, the few thin hairs lift, and there's nothing to trap. You fluff a coat that isn't there. The gesture survives. The blanket is gone. The second old job is fear. And this is the one Darwin saw in his cat. When a frightened or furious animal raises every hair, it doesn't just feel bigger, it looks bigger. The fur stands out in a halo. The body swells. The silhouette doubles. Darwin wrote it down in that same 1872 book. Plainly, the erected hair, he said, serves to make the animal appear larger and more frightful to its enemies or rivals. It's a bluff written in fur. A cornered cat throws up its whole coat to tell a dog, "I am bigger than you thought. Do not." Two jobs then. Trap the heat. Threaten the rival. For 100 million years of furred animals, both jobs ran on the very same machine. You carry now. The same nerve, the same chemical, the same little muscle on each hair, one from war, out of one reflex. And then one branch of mammal did something almost no other mammal did. It took the fur off. We are the strange ones. Among thousands of furred mammals, here is a primate that stripped down to bare skin and walked out into the open. And that is the moment the goosebump becomes a riddle, because the day we lost the fur is the day both of its jobs stopped working, and yet we kept the machine. And the first person to really stare at that riddle, to look at a human being's hair standing on end, and say something bold about what it meant, was Charles Darwin. In the early 1870s, past 60 and often unwell, he was working slowly through the last of his big books, a strange one about the faces animals and people make when they feel something: anger, grief, terror. And he kept circling one small, stubborn detail: the way hair stands up. He had watched it in animals all his life. A frightened cat, its back arched, every hair lifted until it looked twice its size. But he wanted to claim something bolder, that it happens in us too, that a human being in real terror feels the hair rise on their arms and the back of the neck, and he worried on the page that he might be reaching, that it might be near poetic license, a thing writers say and not a thing bodies do. So he did what he always did. He asked for evidence. And a young asylum physician in the north of England named James Crichton Browne wrote back from 1869 onward with exactly what he needed: observations of people in the grip of real, unguarded fear, and the photograph of a patient caught in terror. Here he was saying, here is a human being, frightened past pretending, and look, the hair stands up. It was enough. In 1872, Darwin put it in the book. The bristling of human hair under fear, he wrote, can hardly be understood, except on the belief that man once existed in a much lower and animal-like condition. Read that again, slowly, because it's the whole night in one sentence. He was saying, this thing your skin does makes no sense for you. It only makes sense for the animal you used to be. It is a message left over from a body you no longer have. I'll be honest with you about Darwin here, because we stay honest all night. He pushed the idea too far in places. He tried to tie the raising of human hair to madness, to read it as a sign of a broken mind, and that part of his thinking went nowhere and was quietly abandoned. The durable piece, the one that survived, is the simpler one. The plain fact on your own arm that terror can lift a human hair, and that when it does, you are running a program written for fur you no longer wear. So the riddle only sharpens. When did it happen? When did we go bare? And the honest answer, the one a careful guide has to give you, is that nobody knows. And the reason nobody knows is itself a small wonder. Hair doesn't fossilize. Bone lasts millions of years. Skin and hair rot in weeks. So there is no fossil that says, here, this one was furry, that one was bare. We are trying to date a thing that left no body behind. What we have instead are clever indirect guesses, and they don't agree. Mina Jablonski and others read it from our cooling system. The idea that we shed our fur to sweat, to run and forage under a hot sun without overheating. A case argued from Human Anatomy by Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman. In 2004, that line of reasoning points to somewhere around 1.5 million to 2 million years ago, in the time of the upright early humans. But there's a second clue, and it's one of the most delightfully strange ideas in all of human evolution. To date our nakedness, some scientists studied lice. Here's the logic. Lice live in hair. Different lice live on different patches of you, and they could only split into separate kinds after there was bare skin between the patches to keep them apart. In 2007, David Reed and his colleagues read the clock hidden in lice, the pubic louse in particular, the one that had to jump onto a newly bare patch of us. They dated that host switch to roughly 3.3 million years ago, and they used it as a floor, a minimum. By then, the argument goes, there was already bare skin enough to divide one louse's world from another. So the estimates stretch from under 2 million years to over 3. 1 to 3 million years from a coat we can't find, dated by sweat glands and lice. I'm not going to give you a single tidy number tonight, because the truth doesn't have one. Somewhere in that long blurred window, this animal went bare. And one careful correction, because the internet always gets this wrong. You may have heard a much younger number, that humans went bare around 100,000 years ago. That number is real, but it measures a different thing. In 2003, Ralph Kittler and his colleagues dated a different louse, the kind that lives in clothing, and a clothing louse can't exist until there are clothes. That date falls somewhere around 80 to 170,000 years ago, but it marks when we started covering up, not when we went bare. Two very different things. First, we lost the fur. Then, 1 million+ years later, we got cold and invented the blanket. The fur was long gone, before we ever thought to wear anything. Either way, here is where it leaves the goosebump. Stranded. The muscles still fire. The cold still pulls the trigger. The fear still pulls the trigger. The hairs still strain to stand. And there's no coat to fluff, and no fur to puff into a threat. You raise your hackles, and nothing rises. You signal I am bigger to no one, in a language no one can read, with a pelt you threw away 2 million years ago. It is, on its face, the most pointless thing your body does. A reflex perfectly preserved for a world that ended before there were cities, before there was writing, before there was anything you'd call a person. This is exactly the kind of thing biologists used to file into one cold word: vestigial, a leftover, junk kept by an animal, too thrifty to throw it out. For a long time, that's where the story stopped. A useless twitch, a fossil in the flesh. And then, very recently, somebody looked closer and found out what the leftover had been quietly doing the whole time. In 2020, a team at Harvard led by a scientist named Yaki Hu went looking at that little muscle, not because of Goosebumps, but because they were studying how hair grows. And what they found turned the useless leftover inside out. They were tracing the parts around the hair follicle, and they kept finding the muscle tangled up with something else, a sympathetic nerve, the same kind of nerve that fires the goosebump. And it wasn't just passing by. The muscle was acting like a bracket, a structural anchor, holding that nerve fast against the deepest part of the follicle, the part where the stem cells live. You have to understand what those stem cells are. A hair follicle isn't a fixed thing. It lives in cycles, growing a hair, resting, shedding, growing another, for your whole life. And the engine of that cycle is a tiny reserve of stem cells tucked in the follicle's side. Spend them badly and the follicle dies, and the hair never comes back. Guard them and the hair can regrow again and again. And what Shu's team found is that the nerve, held in place by the goosebump muscle, wraps around those stem cells, almost the way a nerve wraps a target it's talking to. It forms close, synapse-like contacts, and it speaks to them with the very same chemical word that raises a goosebump, norepinephrine. That word, dripped onto the cells, keeps them ready, primed to wake and build new hair. Cut the signal off, the team showed, and the stem cells sink down into a deep sleep. A quiet so deep the follicle stops renewing. So look at what the little muscle is actually for. Yes, it raises the hair when you're cold or afraid, but every other hour of every day, it has a second silent job. It is the clamp that holds the nerve against the follicle stem cells, keeping the line of communication open, keeping the root of the hair alive and able to grow. The thing we call the useless leftover is the scaffold that tends the garden it grows from. And there's a final piece, and it closes a loop we opened hours of evolution ago. Remember that cold is one of the things that fires this nerve. Shu's team put mice in the cold, and the chronic cold signal running down that same wire woke the stem cells and pushed the follicles to grow new hair. In the cold, the mice grew new coats. The reflex you thought was a pointless shiver turned out to be in a furred animal, a way of calling up more fur, exactly when the cold demands it. The goosebump and the growing of the coat are the same circuit. The shiver was ordering the blanket all along. Now, I have to stop you before you do the thing everyone does, because this is where careful matters most. This was mice. New hair in the cold. In under 2 weeks, that was mice. In humans, all they have so far is a hint in a dish, a related chemical dripped on human follicle stem cells in the lab. Nudge them to grow. That is a long, long way from a person. So please do not hear me say that cold showers will regrow your hair. They won't, as far as anyone has shown. And I'm not going to let a beautiful finding turn into a false promise in your ear. What's solid is the structure. The muscle holds the nerve. The nerve tends the stem cells, and that part is real, and it is enough. Because go back to that one hair on your forearm. The little muscle under it isn't waiting around for a fright that rarely comes. Right now, in the dark, while you lie still, it is doing its quiet day job, holding a nerve against the root, keeping the cell that will become tomorrow's hair alive and listening. The most useless muscle on your body has been guarding something the whole time. We just hadn't looked. Come back now to the shiver we started with, the one a song pulls up your arm for no reason at all. We opened the night on it, on Pangsep and his sad music, and his lost child calling in the dark. But back then you didn't yet know what the machine was. Now you do. The muscle, the alarm nerve, the chemical word, the quiet day job under the skin, and knowing it changes everything. About what that shiver means? Scientists have a name for the thing itself. frisson, or aesthetic chills, and a whole science has grown up around chasing it. Because the closer they look, the stranger the everyday miracle of it gets. When the chill comes, you can see the brain light up for it. In 2001, Anne Blood and Robert Zatorre put people in a scanner and played the music that gave them shivers. And at the peak of the chill, the deep reward centers lit up. The same regions that answer to food and sex and powerful drugs. 10 years later, in 2011, Valerie Salimpour and the same Zatorre caught the chemical itself, dopamine, the brain's reward signal, released as the chills built, in one spot while you anticipated the beloved moment coming, and in another spot at the peak itself. It's a thrilling result, and exactly the kind that gets oversold. So here is the careful version. Dopamine is released along with the chill. They did not show that it causes the pleasure. They did not show that music is a drug. That's a headline, not a finding. When music moves you to goosebumps, your brain pours out the same reward chemical. It saves for the things that keep you alive. Not everyone gets them, and who does turns out to be revealing. In 2011, Emily Nussbaum and Paul Sylvia found the people most prone to musical chills score high on one trait above all: openness to experience. The trait of the curious, the absorbed, the ones who fall all the way into a sky. And a few years later, in 2016, Mitchell Culver and Amani Elaleli sharpened it further. It isn't only feeling that brings the chill, it's attention. The people who lean into the music, who half predict the turn before it comes, get the chills more than the rest. You have to meet it halfway. And the chills don't come just anywhere. They cluster on particular moments. Back in 1991, John Sloboda asked people to mark the exact spots where they felt it. A harmony that turns somewhere unexpected and then resolves. Later work by Gree in 2007 added the swell from soft to loud and the key changing under you. A small surprise safely resolved. And on that homecoming, the hair stands up. It's rarer than you'd think, this gift. When the researcher Alf Gabrielson gathered people's strongest experiences with music, only about a tenth mentioned chills, and only 1 in 20 the actual goosebumps. The full body prickle is not an everyday event. It's a small, occasional grace, which is part of what makes it feel like one. And here is the strange size of it. Whatever music is, it is young. Younger than farming, younger than cities. But the reflex it reaches for is not. The shiver it pulls up your arm is older than our species, older than the oldest thing anyone has sung. A brand new art reaching all the way down to pluck a string 1,000,000 years old. But step back and see what's really happening on your arm when a song undoes you. It is the exact same machine, the same little muscle, the same alarm nerve, the same chemical word, norepinephrine, sprayed onto the same root. You are not feeling a special human thing, built for art. You are feeling your oldest survival reflex, going off for no danger at all, in the presence of something beautiful. The alarm repointed at awe, the hackles of a frightened animal, rising now for a song. And once you see it in the goosebump, you start seeing it everywhere. Because the goosebump is not the exception, it's the rule. This is simply how evolution works. And there's a word for it. Most people never learn. In 1982, two biologists, Stephen Jay Gould and Elizabeth Ferber, pointed out that the language of biology was missing a word. We had adaptation, a trait shaped by its job, but we had no clean word for the other more common thing, a trait that arose for one reason, or no reason, and got quietly handed a new job later on. They named it exaptation, and the whole point of the word is to break a lazy assumption, the assumption that what a part is for now is what it was built for. Feathers kept dinosaurs warm, long before anything flew. The bones of your inner ear, the three that let you hear a whisper, were once part of a reptile's jaw. Life doesn't design from scratch. It tinkers. It keeps the old hardware and gives it new work. So the list of useless leftovers keeps shrinking year by year. As we look closer, take the appendix, the textbook punchline for a pointless organ, the thing that does nothing but occasionally try to kill you. In 2007, a team at Duke, including William Parker, offered a different reading, that the appendix is a safe house, a quiet pocket off the main gut, where the good bacteria, the ones you need to digest, to live, can shelter in a protected reserve, so that when an illness storms through and flushes your gut clean, there's a seed bank tucked away to grow the garden back. Now, I'll keep my own rule. That rule is still a hypothesis, argued more than proven, but it's a real one, taken seriously. The organ we mock is a leftover, maybe holding your life's bacteria in reserve. Or take the grandest leftover of all, your own genes. For decades, most of your DNA was called junk. The long stretches that don't spell out any protein were dismissed as evolutionary debris you happen to be carrying. Then, in 2012, a huge project called ENCODE announced that some 80% of the genome showed signs of doing something, of being chemically active, and the headlines declared junk DNA dead. And here, because this is what we do, I have to give you the other side, because it came fast and hard. In 2013, a scientist named Dan Grauer led a fierce rebuttal that ENCODE had cheated with the word function, that mere chemical activity isn't the same as actually doing a useful job, and that a great deal of that DNA may well be along for the ride after all. That argument isn't settled even now, but notice what the fight is even about. It's about how high to set the bar for the word useless. The whole frontier of biology has been quietly moving in one direction, discovering that fewer and fewer things are truly junk, and arguing in good faith about the rest. So here is the false floor, under the whole question we started with. When we asked what good is a goosebump, we smuggled in an assumption that a part of you has one job, fixed forever, and that if that job is gone, the part is waste. That's the wrong picture. That was never how any of it worked. Evolution doesn't keep a thing because it's useful, and toss it when it isn't. It keeps the leftover and waits and tinkers and finds it new work. Vestigial almost never means useless. It means repurposed. It means a thing whose first job ended and whose second job you hadn't noticed yet. The fur fluffer became the keeper of the root. The threat display became the shiver at a symphony. The alarm of a frightened animal became the chill of a person undone by beauty. Nothing was thrown away. Nothing in you is left over. You are not a clean machine built to spec. You are a hand-me-down, patched and repatched across 2 million years. Every old part still in you, every one of them, quietly given something new to do. And that brings us, last of all, to the feeling, the one the chill comes with when it comes from beauty, and not cold. Because there's a name for that too, I know, and a science. In 2003, 2 psychologists, Dr. Keltner and Jonathan Haidt, tried to define the emotion we call awe, and they landed on 2 ingredients. The first is vastness, the sense of something far larger than yourself. A night sky, an ocean, a piece of music, bigger than the room. And the second is stranger. They called it a need for accommodation, the feeling that your mind has to stretch, has to rearrange itself, to even take the thing in. Awe is what you feel when the world is briefly too big for the shape of you, and you have to grow a little to hold it. And here is what awe does to a person measured in 2015. Kolpiff and Dacker Keltner and their colleagues ran the studies, including one where they simply had people stand in a grove of towering trees and look up, and the people who'd felt that vastness came away changed in a small, specific way. They felt smaller. The grand word for it is the diminished self, the sense of yourself as one small thing inside something enormous. And this is the part that matters. That smallness didn't make them sad or anxious or cold. It made them kinder, more generous, more patient, less gripped by themselves. The people who felt small became, for a while, more willing to help a stranger. All shrinks the self, and a shrunk self has more room in it for everything else. So feel what your goosebumps have been doing this whole time. That shiver at the music, at the vast sky, at the thing too big to hold. That is your most ancient reflex. The one older than your nakedness. The one written for fur you lost 2 or 3 million years ago. And it is firing now, not at a predator, but at vastness. Your body's oldest alarm, going off in the presence of something beautiful and enormous, and leaving you, for a moment, smaller. The frightened animals bristle, become the human shiver of awe. The same hair, the same muscle, the same nerve, pointed, finally, at the sky. And you don't have to do anything. With that, you don't have to be more than you are. You're an animal on a turning planet, carrying 2 million years of patched together leftovers, every one of them once useless, and every one of them quietly repurposed into something that keeps you alive or lifts you up. You are not a flaw to be fixed. You're a thing that was kept over and over across an unimaginable stretch of time. Life looked at every old part of you and chose, instead of throwing it away, to find it something new to do, including the small muscle on the hair on your arm, including you. So come all the way back now, from the supernova-sized music and the grove of giant trees, back to the warm dark of your own room, and back to that one hair on your forearm, the one we started with, the one you'd never thought about before tonight. It's lying flat now. Most of them are. Most of the time. But the little muscle at its root is not idle, and it is not waste, and it never was. Down in the warm, deep layer of your skin, in the dark you can't see into, it is doing the quiet thing it does every hour of your life, holding a thread of nerve against the root of the hair, keeping the cell alive that will someday grow the next one. A small, faithful clamp, working through the night, asking nothing of you, doing a job nobody knew it had, until a few years ago, when somebody finally thought to look at the most useless muscle in the body and found it had been keeping watch the whole time. So feel the simple weight of the blanket over you, the ordinary warmth of it, the warmth your bare skin can't trap on its own anymore, the warmth you went and invented a blanket for 1 million years after you set the fur down. There's something almost tender in that. If you let it land, that you are an animal who lost its coat so long ago. It forgot and grew clever enough to weave a new one, and is lying under it now, in the dark, kept warm by a thing you made, because your goosebumps couldn't. And the next time it happens, the next time a song opens all the way up, or a voice catches on the right note, or you step outside and the sky is impossibly full of stars, and you feel that old cold shiver climb your arms for no reason at all, you'll know what it is. Not a malfunction, not a leftover. The oldest reflex you own, the one that once stood, the frightened animal's fur on end, on a plane 2 million years gone, reaching all the way up through all that time to lift a single hair on your arm because something in front of you was too beautiful or too vast to hold, and your body, not knowing the difference between terror and wonder, did the only thing it has ever known how to do. It raised the hair. It made you for a moment smaller. And then, in the warm and the dark, with nothing left to fear and nothing left to do, it let the hair lie back down. You can let it. You can let everything lie back down now. Nothing in you is wasted. Nothing in you was ever thrown away.